And we're live. Welcome to the very first ever Port Washington Board of Education virtual board meeting. This is a budget and facilities meeting, and I am your chair of the Budget and Facilities Committee, Dave Kerpen. I want to apologize for starting a little late. We had some technical difficulties, but we are here, and we look forward to having the best possible meeting we can, given the circumstances and given that this is our very first virtual meeting. A couple of notes before we get started. First of all, if you're watching at home, we will have community comments at the end of the Budget and Facilities meeting, as we always do. The way we'll do community comments is by chat, and I will read your chat comments. Please identify yourself, and please be aware of the fact that this is a Board of Ed meeting. And so while sometimes when we're chatting, we like to be a little informal, I would suggest that you give some thought before you type in the chat if you're watching at home. Also, there are just two items on today's agenda: this year's budget and next year's budget. And I want to open the meeting by saying that while we cannot legally discuss contracts in public, you have my assurance that we will do absolutely everything in our power to reduce costs both this year and next year, to reduce the financial burden on our community. Everything, and I mean everything, is on the table. We may not have a choice for next year, as the governor may very well freeze our budget. But even if we do not have a choice, we surely cannot plan for state aid, meaning that the grim reality is that we have to cut to the bone. While we had planned to do the roofs and other much needed capital improvements, and while of course this is still open for discussion, I believe that it is prudent now to postpone all capital improvements. Furthermore, we need to seek out every possible cut we can in order to keep our budget down. We do not have the reserves that many of our neighboring districts have, and we must look to cut and save where possible. That being said, I'm going to open the meeting with the first agenda item, which is this year's budget and opportunities to save. And I'm going to ask Ms. Callahan for a report on what, if any, savings we have been able to find so far. Ms. Callahan, are you there? And can you unmute yourself to report, please?
Dave, I don't know if you saw on the chat, but Mary said she could not hear anything. So I don't know if that's changed.
Okay. Thank you very much, Emily. I'm going to unmute Mary. Looks like I don't have the controls to unmute Mary. John, would you please unmute Mary? And I will post in the chat for Mary.
I can only see myself. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Nora.
Okay, well, I can only see myself, but as long as, well, I don't know what to do.
You don't need to see anyone, but.
Okay, I don't want to take time up for that, but maybe we'll talk. I'll figure it out after.
So I've asked Mary via chat to update us on savings for this year. And again, John, if you can please unmute Mary, since I am not able to control that, or Mary can unmute herself.
Oh, no.
While we wait for Mary, Deb has requested that I identify who's present at the meeting. So present at the meeting is the Budget and Facilities Committee that is chaired by me, and Emily Bays and Deb Brooks serve on. We also have members of the Board of Education, our president, Nora Johnson, our vice president, Beth Weisberg, Larry Greenstein, our trustee at large, and Rachel Gilliar Smith, our trustee at large. We also have members of our Board of Education Administration, our superintendent, Michael Hines, our assistant superintendent, Mary Callahan, and members of the staff, Jim Restano, Jessica Mack, and Ruth Smith, as well as a member of our technology team, identified here as video engineer, but I believe it is John Johnner. And with that being said, Mary, I believe you are now unmuted, though you may not be able to hear me. I would ask again if you can report, please, on the savings that we were able to capture this for this year. If we don't
So,
hear from
Dave-
Mary soon, I will suggest that
Dave, what I did, I've been texting Mary. I'm asking her to log back off and then to log back in. And I'm
but ultimately, Mike, Mary doesn't need to be able to hear as long as she can. I can report back to her in the chat. I think I'd rather have her report if she could on the savings here.
got it.
Do we know how many members of the public are listening in? Is that, or watching?
Right now, we've got 23. And I want to thank them all for A, for tuning in, and B, for standing by, as obviously we're experiencing quite a few technical difficulties as we live stream for the first time. I appreciate everyone's patience, and I know it's very, very frustrating.
I think I am unmuted now. Do you hear me?
Yes, Mary. So what I had asked is if you can please report on the savings that we've been able to capture for this year's budget and potential savings as well.
Well, we do estimate that on the expenditure side of the budget, we should be able to save between $3 and $3.5 million through a variety of codes, instructional, administrative, and so on. Certainly, we have to pay through our benefits codes and our debt codes. But of course, we have to realize as well that we're expecting revenues to come in on the revenue side of the budget. And those, of course, are uncertain at the moment.
Thank you. And so may I ask, despite the uncertainty, if you could ballpark it so that I could understand what the delta is between the saved expenses and the lost revenues, just within say $500,000, what might you ballpark the lost revenues at?
Well, I'm not saying that they're lost. I'm simply saying we have a big tax payment that's due at the end of April. And tax payments have been authorized to be pushed back until May. So it will all depend on what kind of tax receipts we do get in April, but I can tell you that we still have almost half of our tax receipts outstanding.
Got it. Thank you very much, Mary. Does anyone have questions on what, if anything, we can further save from this year's budget before we move on to discussing next year's budget?
I have a question.
And may I ask, per my note earlier, board committee members and board members, that if you'd like to speak, that you raise your hand in the chat so that I can set up the order like that. But I believe Nora wanted to speak first, so Nora, go ahead. Ms. Johnson, you'll have to unmute yourself if you haven't.
Thanks, Dave. Mary, could you explain a little bit further how we are saving the 3.5 million?
If you give me a minute, I will go to.
Okay, we lost Mary.
While we wait for Mary to come back, I'd like to thank Mary for that lovely and very positive background that she's got, featuring Carte de l'Europe de Charlemagne, 1850. Mary, you'll have to unmute yourself again as you come back.
She was unmuted, but she was calling in as Jonathan, and that it was one of those, and that's where the connection has now been lost. Mary's still Mary, but she was speaking as Jonathan. Okay.
Okay. So we don't have Mary. So while we wait for Mary, are there other questions or comments from the committee or board about the savings for this year?
Dave, I can just speak, and again, as a member of the committee and on the board, I just want to echo what we've all been saying on the board and what you just said earlier, that this unfortunately are trying times and very different times than when we had our last budget meeting, where we were talking about a whole bunch of additions that we thought we could put into our school budget and staying within the tax cap. So unfortunately, this pandemic has left us with no choice but to basically start all over. And the only good news is that it doesn't have to be done by May 19th. We've been given some until at least June 1st, so we can perhaps get some more guidance and some more time to figure out what our actual details are. Like Mary started to mention, if there are savings, what are we doing with the savings? Does that come off our next year's budget? Is it money that we keep in our reserves? Because I think it's also important for us to remember that what the governor has said for next year is that there is no guarantee of state aid. So going back a little bit to the Board of Ed and the Legislative Task Force specifically, were on a campaign asking for an increase in our state aid. And the community had come behind us, and we'd received I think over 1,000 signatures on a petition that we put together to ask for an increase in state aid. Well, that increase in state aid is no longer a discussion point. And if anything, what we've been told from the governor so far is that there'll be a decrease in state aid, and that this state aid cannot be counted on as a number that we're going to get definitively when the budget is passed, that it'll be looked at on a quarter by quarter basis. So this is a first for school districts in really not having a set number. And I think, we unfortunately have to now start thinking out of the box for a lot of things, and hoping that we can come up with some really quick resolutions to try to maintain programming, but somehow deal with what we have been handed.
Thank you, Emily. Luckily, your budget and facilities chair loves more than anything really to think out of the box. So what I'm going to do while we wait for Mary, and I'm going to move us to the second agenda item, which is next year's budget. And I see Larry and Deb would like to speak, so I'll call on them in just a moment. I suggested in my opening remarks that we remove doing the capital improvements from next year's budget. And while it is obviously urgent that we work on the roofs, it is my position that it would be prudent at this time, for financial reasons and to relieve the burden on our taxpayers, to essentially roll the dice for an additional year on the capital improvements and take them out of next year's budget. So I'm going to open that up for comments. So if Larry and Deb, you wanted to speak about something else, I would ask that you hold your comments for now. If you do want to speak about the capital improvements that had been in next year's budget, then I'll invite you guys to speak next. And anyone else, I'd like to make sure we have consensus on this before moving forward to other topics. So, Larry?
I was going to speak about something else.
Okay, thank you. Deb, would you like to speak on the capital improvements for next year?
Yes, I would like to hear from Jim. because my fear is that if the roofs are in dire need of repair and we don't do something to repair the roofs that are in dire need of repair, we are going to be facing a lot more damage and costs that we could have avoided had we bitten the bullet and repaired the roofs. I'm not talking about anything aesthetic. I'm talking about the integrity of the building and everything inside of it. So if a roof goes, then we also have desks and books and very expensive computers and hardware and everything else that would incur an additional cost. So I will defer to Jim Restano on what he thinks about repairing the roofs. I just knowing from owning a house, and this is the community's house, it's not my house, but when you let a roof get really bad, it's not just the roof that needs to be repaired subsequently, it's everything else that comes with the leaky roof, mold remediation, I mean, just everything. So before we let that cascade, I think we should be prudent about the people's house and ask Jim and his crew what he thinks.
Understood. Thank you, Deb.
And maybe it involves putting a tarp. I don't know. You know, maybe there's a way to tarp the roofs to keep the. I don't know. That's why I'm saying, let's ask the expert. Thank you.
Understood. Thank you, Deb. Rachel will be next, and thank you for posting in the chat when you want to speak, so that we can keep some order here. Jim, are you able to speak to? I know, having had conversations with you about this, Jim, it's very, very hard for you to sort of comfortably predict how safe the roofs are. It sounds like Jim is also unable to speak right now. So might I suggest that you post in the chat, Jim, to answer Deb's question to the extent possible of how risky it is to postpone the roof work an additional year. That's essentially your question, Deb. And so you can post that in the chat. And while you do, Rachel, you're up next.
I actually was going to make a very similar point to what Deborah made so eloquently, which is, you know, we listened to Jim speak several months ago, and he said that some of these roofs are what, you know, a roofer who came to any of our houses would consider an emergency. And so while I agree with your overall premise, Dave, and I think that this has to be on the table given the circumstances, I think it's premature to decide for sure that every roof will be cut. I think we should be very open about the fact that we may not do it, but we do have a couple weeks to be gathering more information and figuring it out and looking at the overall picture. But in any budget, you have to sort of look and figure out where it's most prudent to make cuts. And I agree with Deborah that I'm concerned about cutting something that could end up being much costlier. So I think a full report from Jim is in order, and I don't know the decision.
Jim. Well, I tried to call Jim per your point. Thank you, Rachel. I think that makes sense. And to be clear, I'm not saying we have to do this, but it is certainly my opinion that we need to very, very strongly look at it and very likely postpone. It's a huge 1.9 million that we had planned for capital improvements for the roofs is obviously a huge amount, and the savings would be very valuable. And while I certainly understand it is taking a risk, I think it's likely an important risk that we take. Given that we can't hear from Jim at the moment, it's probably wise to wait per your point to officially remove it from next year's budget. I think Nora wanted to speak next. So Nora, go ahead.
Dave, can I just interject in the chat? Mike just said he has Jim on his phone.
I see, but I was waiting for Nora. I got this. I promise I'm seeing all the chats.
I know you're probably all over the technology much more than everybody else.
Thank you, Rachel. Nora, you're up next.
Okay, thanks. I was going to just say that I agree with with Deb and Rachel, but in addition, and I'm not sure if Deb mentioned this, one of my concerns would also be that after we actually get the kids back into the buildings, if one of those roofs were to go, we would have a major disruption in the kids' in-class education again. So that's one of my big concerns. I mean, preserving the buildings, not spending more money ultimately because we're not fixing them when we can or repairing them when we can is all fiscal, and I totally understand that, but I'm concerned about an interruption in education should we have a situation like we had a number of years ago, say with Guggenheim or along those lines.
I totally hear you, and I am a poker player, and so with my poker hat on, I recognize that in many cases, managing a budget is managing risk, and there is certainly a huge risk to not doing this roof work. On the other hand, our savings are going to have to come from somewhere, and while we cannot talk about the details legally, I think we all know that we are going to have to look at all of our contracts with all of our vendors and all of our negotiating units, and we're going to have to really look hard at these contracts. And it is my opinion that this savings is worth the potential risk in this case. We may have Jim available through Mike and via a wide variety of wacky technologies. So we're going to now attempt to hear from Jim on the potential risk of postponing the roof work. Jim?
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry about this. I didn't realize my computer at my office didn't have a microphone or a camera. But Salem's roof is the most important at this time, and that seems to be one of the most expensive. The other ones we can, I use your term, roll the dice. I guess we'd have to do that. But Salem, I'm very concerned about.
So it sounds like, from your perspective, based on managing risk, it might be worth taking the risk of taking Schreiber and out of the budget, but you do believe it is essential to keep the Salem roof and capital improvements there in the budget for next year, Jim?
Yes, because we had to do a temporary repair that I do not know how long it's going to last. So I'm concerned about Salem.
Got it. Thank you so much. Duly noted, certainly by me, and I may, based on your expert opinion, I may adjust my perspective as previously noted. I think we also have Ms. Callahan back. That fantastic. So before I go back to you, Mary, while we are on the topic, is there anyone else that wants to speak on the roofs and/or other capital improvements for next year?
Dave, I would like to say something.
Okay, please do post in the chat if you can, just so I can manage it. But go ahead now, Emily.
Thank you. So Jim, if Salem is the most important, and you said it was the most expensive, can you just remind us again what was the cost for the Salem roof, the projections, and what were the other ones that we had in there as well? So specifically, what was the cost for the Salem roof replacement? Mary, I don't know if you have that or if Jim has it.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I'll jump in finally. The Salem roof, we had budgeted at $1.2 million and $700,000 for the high school, for a total of 1.9 for roofs over and above what we have in the current budget of $880,000.
So that was the transfer to capital, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Mary. Larry's been waiting and posted in the chat. Larry?
Okay, two things. One is, I don't think postponing for a year is postponing for a year, because once we get our state aid cut, that's a permanent cut. And if we get zero this year and they give us $100,000 the next year, they're going to claim we gave you $100,000 more. So I don't expect that in 21, 22, we're going to be back to anywhere near what we're getting this year. So I don't know where the money is going to come from in the future. If we're really thinking outside the box and we really have to look at all options, maybe we close Salem and move everybody into the other schools. It's not anywhere we want to go, but it also costs a lot of money to keep a building open. And if it's a choice between, having a building or not having a building, I'm not proposing it. I'm just saying it's something we have to look at, like we have to look at everything else.
Well, thank you, Larry. I don't disagree that everything should be on the table. I would be cautious about sharing publicly such drastic things as closing a school. But that being said, to your point, I'm not certain that everyone understands the gravity of the economic situation. So to be super clear, it's grave. I mean, it is not a good economic situation, and we need to be realistic about what the impact of the new economic climate that the state is facing and the community is facing on our school district. So,
but Dave, the other thing that I don't know if, in all of our discussions, we're talking about the economics, but, all of us know that our first obligation is to educate the kids. And although we're not bringing them up, continually in this discussion, that's still the first thing on our minds as we're doing this. So I don't want the public to get the impression that we're only looking at this from dollars. We're still trying to provide the best education we can to the students.
Totally, and that's absolutely our imperative, and it's our imperative to give the students the best education while representing the community, both the students and even the entire taxpaying community, and we just have to be super sensitive to the economic challenges that this situation is going to pose to our community. I believe Deborah's up next with a question.
Yes, I reiterate my concern about the safety of the students. I absolutely educating them and having the wonderful programming that makes this district so strong is important. But if they don't have safe conditions in which to learn, that is a concern for me, as it hopefully is for the community. So in recognizing that, and given that I don't know the answers, so these are questions I am asking, is it legal to use money that we would have used for next year's construction? Is there some way to ask the state to funnel that money? And I understand that the public voted on this. I understand the public voted for the bond for the various construction projects. Is there a way to get a public vote on using some of that money for the roofs instead of the Schreiber cafeteria or any of the other things? And it may not be a popular idea, but it's just an idea.
I appreciate your thinking outside of the box. And while I can't imagine it would be legal, we could challenge anything. I don't know if you want to speak to that, Mary, given that our attorneys are not on the call.
These are unique times, but I have never heard of that before, that it's allowable to use the money for other than what it was approved for by the community.
Thank you.
I am still there, right? Okay.
You are. Thank you, Mary. I just want to note for the record that Mary has put forward other capital improvements that were previously in the next year's budget, the recoding of the track and the asbestos abatement. From my perspective, these things, anything that's not absolutely urgent, absolutely needs to come out of the budget. I don't know that I'll get any pushback on that, but certainly board members and committee members, if you disagree with me, feel free to raise your hand and speak on that. I believe Emily has a question.
Yeah, actually, I have a question for Mary, David. I don't know. I think we were going to do this originally, and then we had tech issues. But
are you on this? Are you on this year or next year? I don't want to jump back and forth too much. So right now we're on next. We're on next year.
On this year?
No, on next year.
Next year. So what I would like to hear from Mary is, what she thinks, because what type of savings based on the budget that we had already put together, what are things that are now being taken out, and what is the money, where are we money wise, and how much further do we need to go? Because I assume that Mary's already done some numbers, so I'd like to hear from her what the numbers are and what we have to do.
For next year.
Yes.
Okay, I'm not sure that Mary has been able to do that, but to the extent possible, Mary, can you speak to any items you've been able to take out of next year's budget and the sort of the delta between the next year's budget as of a month ago and next year's budget as of now?
Right. Well, a month ago, we had a $6 million increase, $2 million of which was for roof work alone. Another $880,000 for other transfer to capital items. So that was half of our increase. If we remove part of that, the high school roof, and if you consider either the asbestos abatement and the track recoating, that helps a little bit. Certainly keep in mind also, as I always talk, the convoluted formula we have, that you won't see an absolute even reduction between budget and levy because of the exclusion formula, but there will certainly be a reduction. I have brought all of the proposed supply and equipment codes down to the current year, but we certainly need to go much lower. That's the best I can say right now. I was very disappointed with my first projection last night.
Thank you, Mary, for that update. Emily, did you have a follow-up question?
Yeah. And in our proposed budget that we had a month ago, Mary, we also had new hires, correct? That we are no longer proposing? Is that
correct? There is absolutely no staffing in this proposed budget.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions on next year's budget, which was agenda item 2? I see Deb. Thank you for posting, and then Rachel.
Mary, could you please tell us what percentage of our budget comes from state funding, from state aid, what that represents, and what that would translate to in terms of cuts that would need to be made to your current proposed budget? Well, your budget, your pre-corona budget. I guess what I'm asking is,
I think I have a sense of what you mean. Our state aid is 6% of our budget, but as I mentioned to the superintendent yesterday, our state aid is more than our total fund balance. In an email exchange with our attorney last night, he had heard, and this is not definite, that state funding will go back to the 2017 level. That would be a $2 million cut for Port Washington. And in my first run through the budget last night, I was able to cut $2 million. But that basically left us where we started from, with a 3.96 budget. So it has to be cut even more if you follow that analogy. If the revenue goes down by 2 million and the expenditures go down by 2 million, you've just evened out, but you haven't truly cut your increase.
Makes sense. Thank you, Mary. And next up is Rachel.
Thanks, Dave. So, Mary, for the public that's listening and for the rest of us, my concern as I'm listening to this is, while I am completely on board and I think we're all on exactly the same page, we want to continue to provide the best education we can. We really don't want to cut programs. We really don't want to have to increase class size. We really want to maintain all the things that make our schools great and that we think are important to the quality of education here. But we are faced with a potential shortfall of $6 million. and really trying financial times for the taxpayers. And so we have to be responsible for that too. And it's going to be a tightrope walk. And I think everybody's going to have to be patient as we have these discussions over the next month or so. But the countervailing concern that I have as I'm listening is that part of the way that we got into the situation that we're in Port Washington, where we do have very, very tight budgets, and we've slowly been working our way back up to providing some of the things that we thought really were necessary for a high quality education, is that when the tax cap came into effect, we didn't have a lot of wiggle room in our budget. And so we've been passing budgets that are very, very close to the tax cap because we need to eke out those extra dollars to maintain the quality of education. And we're not spending wildly on or freely on crazy luxury education items when we do that. We're adding a few extra positions every year that are absolutely necessary for population. So this is my question. For everybody who's listening, can you talk for a minute a little bit about the implications of if we were to do a budget that has zero increase? Because well, not maybe not 0%, right? Use whatever figure you want that's reasonable, right? But what is the implication for later on if we do not take advantage of taking a budget close to where the tax cap is? Because I think that's what we're talking about doing, right? And that is a decision that will echo for years and years down the line, even as the economic position of the town continues to improve. So I know that that's a really broad question for you, but I think it's important that everybody understand that we're making decisions that don't just implicate this year's budget, next year's budget. It's the education for the next decade, if not longer, potentially.
That is a broad stroke question, but I will start by saying, as you can see, or as you could hear from Mr. Restano, we don't spend frivolously in areas aside from, not even aside, including education. I am very proud of our community that we have been able to take, for example, our instructional Chromebooks and provide them on loan for students who are in need. But we are not a district that had an implement for every student to take home already. So you can see from that example in technology alone that we are working very hard, and the money that the district has is going to the instructional program. All that being said, in simple numbers, if our budget is $160 million, $1.6 million equals 1%. For every 1% we want to reduce our increase, that's $1,600,000, $3,200,000 for 2%. $3,200,000 in staffing is 25 people. That would be 3/4 of an elementary school. And that certainly impacts class size, that impacts the ability to provide individualized instruction to students, and it goes on and on and on, depending on where those cuts would be.
Thank you, Mary. I lost chat. I had to leave the call for a moment. So if you were waiting, please post again in the chat if you were waiting to speak on the issue of next year's budget. If not, I'm going to move back to this year's budget now that we have Ms. Callahan back.
Can I just add one thing, Dave?
Sure.
Building on Mary. So Mary, though, if our tax cap for the following year is built on whatever the previous year is as well, right?
Yes, because it's you take your prior year budget and your percentage increase, and then you look to see what your allowable levy is.
Okay. So a giant cut can't come back arbitrarily in the year that we decide that it's the right time to afford it. We would end up having to slowly build back, as we have with some of these previous ones.
And the only way it would build back faster would be if the community supported a supermajority of 60% or more. Yes, otherwise it takes years and years.
I'll just note that while that is true, we're operating under the assumption that nothing will change regarding tax cap law. And I think it is the only thing that it's safe to assume is that we will see some changes in how the state of New York operates with respect to funding of schools. So we just have to keep our out of the box hats on for sure. I see that our superintendent, Mike Hines, would like to speak, followed by Deb. Mike, go ahead.
Okay, I'll make this quick. But I appreciate everyone as far as their view about what their thoughts are for savings for this year's budget and certainly next year. And for those who are listening live and/or will listen to this at a later date, I think some of the messaging that's getting out there is, we're talking about staff, and when we talk about staff is when, people start really paying attention and what that means. And because I think there are so many unknowns, I think we can speculate a lot about what's going to happen. And, it sounds like each day, or at least every 2 days, we're finding out new information, either from the governor or from the state education department. I think the message for today has to be, listen, clearly the game has changed and it's changing as we're playing it. But in the end, and this is just me speaking, when we start losing personnel, I'm not saying that's what will happen, but if that is the case, we have all been around long enough to know how long it takes to get it back. It takes a very, very long time. And so, as Dave says often, we need to think outside the box. I think we need to throw away the box and start thinking in a whole new way as far as how we can save money to make sure, to the best of our ability, that we don't lose staff, because they're all essential right now. Even the ones that we're looking to add, I think, as Emily was saying before, these are not frivolous, or Rachel maybe, we really need them. So in the sense of everything that we're doing is geared toward what's best for kids, we need to start thinking about every single thing that we can do to make that a last resort, because it will take years, and I know you know that, to get that back. So I just wanted to say that. Thanks.
Thank you, Mike. Duly noted. And I bet you guys aren't going to push back so hard on my copy and print center budget line anymore. Next up, we've got Deb, followed by Larry. I'm not sure that Larry wants to speak, but Deb's up next.
I was going to say this is a time of great uncertainty, and as my dad loves to say, we won't know until the fat lady sings, reference to K. Smith. So a lot of this is conjecture, but it's trying to be prudent and aware and inform and advise the community so that if these things do happen, no one is caught off guard. So I think that's important to say, that we don't know what's going to happen. We have an idea, but nobody knows for sure right now, except maybe the governor, and he's not saying. I do remember in my own lifetime here in the community, there was a budget failure. I can't remember the year. And I know that there were a lot of cuts made. I know it impacted education. And I almost feel as though within the past couple of years, we clawed back, because we were starting to claw back after that budget failure. And then the tax cap hit us a few years after that. And we've just been slowly clawing our way back up the hill. And I almost feel as though it's, I can't remember the name of the Greek who was pushing that rock up the hill. And I feel like we're getting the rock pushed back.
I believe it was Sisyphus.
Thank you. I was going to say Sisyphus, but I was afraid it would come out another word, so I just decided not to.
You could have just asked the Greek in the room.
Yeah. So, but to go back to my other comment about the roof, you know, I know that the community voted on the Mega Million bond project. I just didn't know if changing something out of that project could go back to the community. I wasn't saying the board should do it. I was going to say is should we take it back to the community and see if the community would okay a refunneling of those funds? I don't know if it's legal to, but the community voted on it. And I also don't know the answer. Is there a way, I guess this is governed by law, is there a way to find a different roofing company that would be competent but less expensive, that's not approved by state ed, but maybe they would give us a waiver? I mean, at this point, if you don't ask, you don't get. So I'm just asking.
I appreciate your comments, Deb. I'm going to move us forward for purposes of time here. And I also want to note Mary and Larry's excellent historical references. Thank you. So the conversation, the first agenda item that we had that we postponed because of technical difficulties with Mary was cost savings from this year. So Mary, if you, I believe when last we were on this topic, you were discussing I had asked you for the potential delta between recouped savings and potentially lost revenues or postponed revenues. Again, I'm not sure if you can speak to that, and then I'll open it up to anyone else from the committee or board that wants to speak to out-of-the-box ideas that we can legally talk about in public for this year's budget.
Well, as I tried to begin to say earlier, we have $3.6 million in potential savings. The question was asked where that money came from. It's supplies, equipment, copier paper, repairs, travel, postage. But a big portion does come certainly from substitute teachers, substitutes in all areas, whether they're paraprofessionals or clericals, for the reduction in time for coaches and club supervisors, nurse substitutes, and some health insurance savings. So that's where we come to the $3.6 million. If we do not open the doors again before the end of the school year. And then we do have $60 million in tax payments that are outstanding. So what is the delta? $56 million. I really don't anticipate that, because there is what is referred to legislatively as the county guarantee, that if people do not pay their taxes, the county is legally required to pay us. Of course, the question is, how are those resources anyhow? But all of that is yet to be seen.
Thank you, Mary. I believe Emily's up next.
Mary, if I caught you correctly, you said the $3.6 million is savings if we do not open again by the end
Yes.
of the, okay. So that also is a big question mark, correct? Because we do not know that we're not opening again. We may be opening in the end of April. We don't know. We might open in May.
Correct.
So Dave, I don't know that we can actually have a actual savings number, correct?
Well, there's a lot of uncertainty for sure.
Mary was going to
Right, because last month when we had a budget presentation, my expectation was that we would have about $350,000 of unexpended, of less expenditures. And this would be 10 times that if we do not open the doors. But I thought that that had been the question that was posed for today.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted it to be clear that that number is still not I don't want anybody to think, oh, we have 3.6 that we saved. We don't have that for sure.
Correct.
Thank you, Emily and Mary. I believe Larry is up next.
I just want to know if we're short this $60 million in tax revenue and we have to go out for a tax anticipation note. I hear interest rates are dropping. Would we be getting that at a good rate? What would that sort of cost us? And is that factored into the projections at all?
I have not factored in the tax anticipation note, which we do traditionally at the end of every May, to provide us with revenues from July to October when we receive our first tax payment. But when I contacted our fiscal advisor last week, I was told actually just the opposite, that borrowing money, the rates are going up, and to stay out of the market for as long as possible till things settled.
Okay, I'm not seeing anyone else.
Thank you.
Questions or comments? Thank you, Larry. Thank you, Mary, in the chat. I'm going to move to community comments in just a moment. So if you're watching and you do have a community comment or question, please post it in the YouTube chat, and I will read it aloud. Before I do that, are there any other comments or questions from the committee or board?
I do have a question.
Go ahead.
Unfortunately, because of technology, I missed the very beginning of the meeting. Came in around transfer to capital. Was there any direction prior to that discussion relative to specific reductions the board had come to consensus on?
I would say not yet consensus. I spoke rather strongly, I believe, on the need to move the some of the roof dollars, but we definitely don't have consensus on that yet. So, and obviously we will be privately looking at all contracts, and I spoke of that, but that was really the only thing you missed, Mary.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments from the board or committee or administration? And I'm going to now, as I say that, pull up our live chat. And sadly, or perhaps excitingly, there is nothing yet. So I'm going to give our community a moment more, because there's likely a short delay, to post a question or comment. While I do that, I do want to thank the 26 people watching live. I believe that this is record attendance for a budget and facilities meeting, which is very, very exciting. And I want to thank Julie Epstein for getting the word out, as well as her comments. And we do have a question or comment. So I'm going to read it aloud for the record. So Dave Sattinger would like to know the following. Do we have a handle on how many Port children are in private schools, who they are, and an ability to communicate with families to see if we may have a sudden influx next year? In other words, is there a way to potentially anticipate new enrollments based on the changing economic climate and private schools? That's a super interesting question. I believe Mary has an answer.
Well, I can tell you that based on transportation requests and textbook requests, we know we have over 600 students K-12 that attend private and parochial school. Thus far, I have not heard anything from our registrar's office. They are communicating with people electronically and picking up their phone messages. So at this point, we have not heard of any influx of students, but there is always that potential when there's an economic downturn.
Thank you, Mary, and thank you, Dave, for that question. And it's good to see you and connect with you, even if I can't actually see you face to face or give you a high five for our Mets. Are there any other questions or comments from the community?
Dave, I had put that I wanted to say something, but you can wait for community if you want.
Go ahead, Emily.
I just want to go back to Mary's question about directive from the board with regards to transfer to capital. We didn't have consensus, but I think it might be, we kind of said that, we heard from Jim saying that the Salem roof is a must in his mind, which is $1.2 million in money that we had for transfer to capital. I think it would be wise for us to have a discussion around and see if we can get consensus from the board on what we think with regards to the rest of the transfer to capital items. I mean, for me personally, I would go with what Jim is recommending, except that I am with you in the original statement that you made that I don't think transfer to capital is an option for us at this point, and I don't know, I also I'm troubled because I worry about the safety of the kids and the staff, but I do not know.
I understand, Emily. I'm choosing to not have the discussion now. I think we've had a postponement in when the budget vote will be at an absolute minimum, and given so much uncertainty that we have, I think it's something that we should all think about, and will definitely be on the budget on the agenda for the next budget and facilities meeting. I believe Rachel also had a question or comment. Again, I'd like to encourage us not to reopen for further discussions, but if it's important and relevant, please go ahead, Rachel.
Yeah, I can defer to you on we have this discussion. I was just going to suggest that if Emily is concerned about having a sense where the board stands, my guess is that we are probably all in agreement that the most we would probably do next year would be the Salem roof. Right, we could probably agree that the rest of it is off the table for right now. But if you want to not extend the conversation, I totally understand that, because I think things are very nebulous right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think the uncertainty that we see with the financial impact from day to day, it makes it very, very hard to predict this. It's definitely good to know that at least only Salem is urgent. So I don't disagree with you that likely the board consensus is to drop the high school roof, asbestos and track, which to Mary's point would be $966,000 of savings. But I really don't want to assume that, and I'm sure that some people have some questions too. And so, given that there's no major advantage to moving with expediency for next year's budget, I think I'm going to stick with my prerogative to hold off on formalizing that consensus for now.
Completely fair. It deserves a lot more time than we are able to give it today.
We have no further public comment from the community, except a very important note from Dave Sattinger saying that I am beautiful, and of course, let's go Mets. You didn't identify yourself, so now I just know that it's N Gargis saying thank you. I don't know what the N stands for, but thank you for all the thank yous coming in, and I'm going to close with a story of some good news.
Fellow Greek Nicoletta Gargis, and she's the co-president of the HSA of Guggenheim. So yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you for identifying her, Emily. Many of you who follow me on social media already know this story, but I'm going to close with this story, even if it's somewhat irrelevant to the budget and facilities work that we do. My father is 75 years old. He had lung cancer last year. He has emphysema and he has COPD. He's in pretty bad shape with respect to his lungs. And 10 days ago, he was rushed to the ER at Montefiore Hospital with a decreased ability to breathe and a high fever, and was subsequently diagnosed with COVID-19. And last night he was discharged, having beaten the symptoms and successfully overcome COVID-19, despite being in the riskiest of situations. So I'm going to close the meeting by saying, here's to you, Dad. Love you. And I hope all of you watching at home can attend the board meeting tonight at 8 o'clock. And thanks again to everyone for bearing with us with the challenges that are the new normal with meetings. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, Dave.